This week, we welcome Martin Tschammer, Head of Security at Synthesia, to discuss how to achieve AI governance through ISO 42001 certification. In the Leadership and Communication section, are two CEOs better than one? Here are the benefits and drawbacks you must consider. CISOs rethink hiring to emphasize skills over degrees and experience. Finally, they listen to us. Why clear executive communication is a silent driver of organizational success, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
The threat landscape is constantly evolving, making it nearly impossible for security teams to keep up. That's why so many top companies turn to Tines, a security orchestration and automation platform built by security practitioners for security practitioners. Tines empowers analysts and engineers to automate their most repetitive, time-consuming tasks. No coding expertise required, just the flexibility to tailor workflows to your team's exact needs. Ready to break free from the limitations of traditional tools? Learn more at securityweekly.com/Tines. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 392, recorded April 21st, 2025. I am your host, Matt Alderman. I hope everyone had a wonderful Easter and Passover. Yesterday was also 420, so some people were definitely happy yesterday, so we'll leave it at that. Joining me for this interview segment today are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque.
Hey, Matt, all I can say is that the Rasta Rabbit memes were flying around everywhere yesterday.
Yeah. It was a different kind of Easter basket grass, is what I heard.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, exactly right.
So, Matt, NFL draft this week.
I know.
Starting the 24th, huh?
Yeah.
Who you picking number one? I'm going Travis Hunter.
Really?
Yeah.
I keep seeing Cam Ward being number one, so I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to watch, nonetheless. Yeah. I got to see what the Browns do. Like, are they going to trade? What are they going to do at number two?
I think there's going to be some trades happening.
I think so too. Like, they brought Flacco back, and you think about that, and you're like, okay, why? And then it's like, well, maybe that's the holdover because they're looking for a quarterback out of next year's class. I don't know. We'll see. Right. Yeah, these are all the fun little things with the draft. Also joining your first co-host assignment, Summer Fowler. Welcome, Summer.
Hello. Thanks for having me here. I'm looking forward to this.
Yes.
And a great topic for my first one.
It is. It's a really good topic for your first one because we were talking about AI and some stuff. So I thought this would be a really good segment for you to join. So it's awesome. One quick announcement, and then we'll get in. Identiverse 2025 is returning to Las Vegas, June 3rd to 6th. Hear from over 250 expert speakers and connect with over 3,000 identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Plus, take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new Non-Human Identity Pavilion. Register now and save 25% with code IDV25-SecurityWeekly by visiting securityweekly.com/IDV2025. Martin Tschammer is a seasoned cybersecurity expert, currently spearheading the development of a world-class security and AI governance program at the hypergrowth AI unicorn Synthesia. Martin's previous experience as a startup CTO and product engineer come in handy when philosophizing about integrating security with product in a sane way. I like sane. Martin, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Yes, thank you. So you are one of, I don't know how many are actually ISO 42001 certified, which is the ISO AI kind of governance framework. But you're here to talk about the process, which I think will be a little interesting for people on what does it take to get AI certified, I guess.
Yeah. The process, the progress, everything you want to know about it. Happy to talk about it. It's been a journey.
So let's start with why ISO. Well, one, you're in Stockholm, so I kind of understand why ISO 42001. But for everybody else, why ISO 42001?
Yeah, good question. And to be fair, I'm in Stockholm. Our headquarters is in London, in the UK. So still in this general vicinity, and absolutely makes sense for us. So why ISO 42001? I think to answer this question, maybe it makes sense to zoom out a little bit and talk about AI governance in the first place. Like, why AI governance? What even is AI governance, right? I think depending on who you ask, you will get 15 different answers. And for Synthesia, we asked ourselves this question even before AI governance was a term that really came up anywhere. Like even before anybody had ushered the word or uttered the words AI governance, we started caring about this as part of the DNA of the company because of what Synthesia does. So Synthesia, for those who maybe are not familiar, helps or allows our users to create videos with AI avatars. So you can use one of our stock avatars, or you can create your own avatar, and then put that in a video, write some video script, click a generate button, and a couple minutes later, you have a really nice looking video presentation, right? So that is really helpful for our customers, but also in the beginning, let's say 2017, 2018, this was a very novel concept that when you explain this to people, I know when I started working at Synthesia and explained this to people, the first reaction was always, "Oh, you mean deepfakes? Is that what you're selling deepfakes?" So Synthesia leadership realized that if we want to not just be the market leader in this new space, but in effect, help create this new market area, this new market in general, we would have to care about certain things, right? So we would have to care about consent and control. Who can use these avatars? Security, privacy, all these things. And we would not just have to actually say that we care about it, but we would have to actually do it and be able to prove it. We would have to be able to evidence it. So very early on, Victor, Stefan, our CEO, CFO, co-founders, they sat down, they created this model that we call the 3 C's. So consent, control, and collaboration, which ended up being our, in effect, AI governance model. So consent, we said we will never create an avatar or a voice clone without the consent of the person who it belongs to. So we needed to implement certain controls around that. We needed to care about control, meaning if I have an avatar, I control who gets to use it and how it is used. So at that point, we're talking access controls, we're talking moderation, all of these things. And then collaboration, as in engaging with regulatory bodies, ICO, EU, US regulators, etc., and then industry partnerships, like the content authenticity initiatives that we are part of. So we spend, from very, very early on, we spend an enormous amount of time and energy and frankly money on making sure that these things are part of the business. And then now I'm coming back to your question, which is then, how does this all result in us saying, okay, we want to do ISO 42001? Well, we were made aware of the standard. And this was at a time where we had started internal conversations around, formalizing our framework a little bit more, and then potentially socializing it externally to other AI companies, because we really believe that there's value in making sure that everybody does it in the right way. We want to make sure that AI as a field goes in the right direction, right? And then when we saw ISO 42001, we said, "Oh, hold on a second! Like we're reading the control system. We're like, oh wait, this is exactly, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're doing this. This maps really well to what we're doing, and it is a chance for external validation, external assurance from a very trusted entity." So we said, "Hell yeah." Let's do this. So the actual then certification journey for us took 6 months, which I think some people will hear this and be like, "Are you what?"
Yeah.
How? But this comes from the fact that we had a very similar approach as part of our DNA from the beginning, right? So for us, largely it was mapping what we already had to these controls.
So I know Summer's got lots of questions, but just a quick one. Is 6 months fast or long?
I would argue it's fast.
Okay.
I would argue it's fast. I'm sure, it always depends a little bit on the DNA of your business and what space you're in. I would say it's fast.
Because you already had a framework in place that mapped really well into ISO 42001, therefore probably faster than most, which means for other people it could take longer.
I would say so. So it depends on who you are and what the maturity of your existing governance efforts are. If you have certain things embedded, I can touch upon this later, but if you have certain things deeply embedded into your, your software development lifecycle, et cetera, like risk management, and you already know what kind of data you're using, where it comes from, who's handling it, et cetera, then it might be faster. If this is the first time you're going through this kind of exercise, I would say expect a year, maybe.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I was going to say 6 months seems pretty fast, just having gone through some other ISO activities like 27001 and getting that certification. Martin, what was your role in getting the certification? Because there's been a lot of debate in the field, right? Head of security, what's your role when it comes to AI? Now, you're at an AI company, so it's a little bit different, but were you leading the effort to get the certification?
Yeah, it's a great question. I am one of the system leaders, one of the two system leaders behind our AI management system. And I was co-leading the efforts around this together with our DPO and one of our legal counsels, Sasha Makota, great guy. That said, I mean, let's be honest. We are doing the paperwork for this, right? So as the head of security, obviously I own many different things. I own large parts of our risk management framework. I own, the security efforts, and I interface a lot with the other stakeholders who, are part of running the company. But at the end of the day, nobody can do this as kind of like a lone wolf exercise. And I think this is really a valuable lesson that as early on as possible, you need to get the business, and when I say the business, it's not just the business leadership, but you need to get the people who actually do the work on board, and you need to get them aligned, right? And I can talk about that for a very long time.
So for some of our listeners, they may be going into AI governance brand new, right? And they don't really know where to begin. And there's a lot of competing frameworks and guidelines and standards out there in the industry. I mean, NIST AI RMF, right? There's OECD, there's the EU AI Act, there's so many different things out there that cybersecurity leaders could be saying, how do I wrap my head around this, right? What's the differentiator for ISO 42001? I mean, I know it's the first international standard that's been published, but what are the differentiators that made you say, you want to know what? I want to go down this path versus leverage other frameworks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, it is the first global standard, and ISO as an organization comes with a large amount of trust and experience, I would say. And also, they are highly aligned with the regulatory frameworks that we are seeing on the horizon. So you mentioned the EU AI Act. So the EU and ISO as organizations, they historically speaking have been working very close. So it just made sense.
Good.
Yeah, and to be certified kind of means something, right? It means you've gone through the certification process. And I do want to talk about that a little bit because I think what you went through is interesting. And I think others should kind of experience, what does that certification process look like? But before I do that, I just want to make sure Summer or Jason didn't have any other questions on kind of the backstory, the background.
No, I think as we dig in, I'd be interested in figuring out, number one, the depth of involvement from the rest of the business and the level of effort that you had to set expectations with the rest of the business on, right? Because that's an important piece of being a leader within an organization. Be able to collaborate with your peers, level set on expectations, so that way they know what they need to dedicate as far as resources toward this certification. Because in many instances, you may run up against competing priorities and you have to make a decision. Am I going to have folks aligned to the certification, or are they going to go off and keep the business running? And there needs to be that level of expectation of level of effort for the rest of the business.
Yeah, totally agree. I think there are really two big things at play here. So at least for me, or like in my experience. So one is what I like to call the internal framing of these kinds of efforts. And this is not specific to ISO 42001. I'm going to say it applies to all of our, I'm going to use what I say is a bad word, for our compliance efforts. And let me explain why I think that is a bad word. So internally, I really don't like to use the word compliance unless I absolutely have to. For me, it is about business enablement. So to be a little bit crass here, I usually, when I onboard new people and I have to explain to them the drivers behind the security program and like why we do the things that we do, I like to say this: I like money. And I like Synthesia to make money. And in order to do these things, we need to care about certain things, like regulatory compliance or regulatory rules, contractual obligations, et cetera, et cetera. And a big part of this is also trust and doing the right things and being able to prove that we do the right things. So in my team, I've actually made the word compliance a little bit of a taboo word. Nobody is allowed to say the word compliance when they speak to other stakeholders. We talk about business enablement. So this is a business enablement driven thing. And that really gets people on board, right? Because this makes them go from, do I really have to do this? Oh, this is so boring, to, of course I'm going to do this because I like Synthesia to succeed. So that's a big part of it. And then I think the other big thing is kind of like a flip side of that, being able to find that balance and adapting as much as you can some of these some of the paperwork exercises or some of these control limitations to the business reality. So I think there can sometimes be a temptation to use that big stick of like, the control says exactly this, we have to do it exactly this way, and then not understanding the business context or how this can fit in to the wider kind of ecosystem that is your company and stakeholder expectations. So being able to understand the business processes that exist in your company and then adapting as much as possible what has to be done to that reality is, I think, a really important skill that sometimes I see missing in people who own these kinds of systems.
We see it all the time, Martin. So you're in good company because we feel the same way you do, right? Like security for compliance sake is not going to get you secure, right? Exactly. We talk about that a lot, right? But your approach in aligning it with the business and driving it from basically a revenue perspective is look, we don't hear that story very often. People do it because, oh, I got to do the checkbox. But when you can put it into that context, it makes the journey, I think, a little easier because now everybody's bought in because the outcome is the success of the business, not a compliance mark of, hey, we're compliant, yay. So what?
And Matt, to your point, it just positions the team as a business enabler versus a roadblock, like security teams were traditionally viewed as, right? And we've been trying to beat down that door forever, and this is a perfect strategy, aligned to business goals, right out of the gate.
Absolutely. But again, I do think it's worth underlining that makes sense as long as you then, as a compliance kind of like owner, also put in the effort to really understand the business and to streamline it as much as possible. And there are, you need to understand the business, but then there are also certain things that you can do from a technological perspective. I mean, compliance management is a whole thing, right? And being able to hook monitoring into key systems so that you can continuously consume evidence without having to knock on the door of the people who have, frankly, better things to do than to give you some report, make their life easier, and make them understand the why behind you're doing these kind of things. And then, if you're lucky, you will succeed.
I think that's an important point. I want to dive into the process that you went through. Then I think I'd love to circle back on the helping other security leads determine the tipping point when they should say, this would be a business enabler for my organization. I think that would be a cool thing once we walk through this. Hey, this is what it took me to get 42001 certified.
Yeah, happy to talk. So, do I understand you correctly? You would like to talk a little bit more about the practicalities of it?
Yeah. What did it take you to get there? You had the 3 C's, right? And you said, hey, this really lines up with what the 42001, is it 38 controls, I think, that it has. And we seem to be aligned. And it took you 6 months. Can you talk us through sort of the phases?
100%. So, I will maybe say, so again, our experience comes from the place of having some of this already in place and then just needing to do the paperwork to evidence it, right? Like collecting screenshots, like hooking it into the right systems. So there is that, and I can talk about that. I do think there is maybe value in just really quickly talking about some of like the biggest hurdles that I think most organizations will run into, which risk assessment as part of your development process is a big thing, obviously, that you should consider. If you're going down the route of a ISO 27001 or a similar framework, even if you do SOC 2, maybe you already have something here. I will say for us, we integrated this into the process as early as possible. So in our development lifecycle, we create these product requirement documents. Then later we create a more technical document. And even as part of like the earliest stage where somebody like from the product team sits down and writes this product requirements document, we already then we have a mixed process of an LLM and somebody from my team, from the security team, consuming these in a continuous fashion and then identifying kind of like high risk areas. And then they will be structured into a threat model. And then from there, they go into the risk register, et cetera, et cetera. So for ISO 42001, we were more or less already there. What we added on was like AI management specific risks, like resourcing not being available, impacts on stakeholders, like making sure that we have a formal definition of who are our internal and external stakeholders for this AI system. What are the different dimensions of impact, financial, legal, etc., that we might see them being affected on, and to what degree, and then integrating that into our threat models. So that's having that line of thought when you develop new features, and that kind of like structure around it, I think is really valuable and can take time to get to if you don't already have something. Then data governance and integrity, I touched upon it earlier. So being able to evidence where or how do you source your data, from that point of entry, where does it flow, who has access to it, how do you ensure that it is not modified in the process, how is it being used, to what degree, depending on kind of like what your AI system does. I think this is very important to understand. Depending on your AI system, some of these controls will carry more weight than others, right? But does your source data support the appropriate need for what is the word? Ensuring that there is no inherent bias in your model, That is important to understand. Quality of the data, right? And everything around that is hard to tack on later if you're not doing it. This can take time. And this can take time from a technological and from a process perspective. But also if there is no desire or no kind of like inherent understanding that you need to do this kind of thing, it can be hard to get stakeholders on board. So there's also, to some degree, maybe a political thing, right? Then we're talking about things like continuous monitoring of your models. So not just from a sure. I mean, there's a usual, Datadog, performance monitoring, etc., making sure that your systems are robust and all that. Yes, that needs to be in place, and that is a whole thing. But then also, if your AI model is depending on what it is used for, it might make sense to actually continuously red team it. So we're doing this. We're periodically asking external consultants to help us determine the robustness of our moderation function and our AI avatar creation. So they will try to bypass our consent checks. They will help test our the moderation function. Can they somehow creatively create political content or fake news content using our platform? This kind of thing. So continuous monitoring, not just from the perspective of kind of like system robustness, but also considering like how might my AI model be misused, and are my controls or our controls that we have in place robust enough to withstand that kind of misuse. I think is similar to maybe the bug bounty and pen testing process of the world, but still different, right? That understanding needs to exist. So, also, frankly, because it costs money.
So Martin, you go through the process, you go through finding all the artifacts, submitting, you get the certification. What, a lot of what we try to do here is enable folks for the future and teach them, right? And allow them to learn from our experiences. What are some of the gotchas? What are the lessons learned going through this process that you can share with other folks who are getting ready to go through this certification to kind of look around the corner a little bit and give them some visibility so that way they can be prepared and not get hit with those gotchas?
Absolutely. I think we touched upon it already. So looking back, I would say, first and foremost, the best time to start caring about AI governance, this old saying, best time to start was like 2 years ago or whatever. The second best time is now. So do it early, because this is not really something that you can tack on. And again, it's not something that you could do lone wolf style later on. So you put in the work as early as you can, and then invest into streamlining your operations as much as you can. Understand what can be automated to a meaningful degree, and if not, understand who the owners are and get them on board and make sure they understand exactly what you need of them and why and how. And this internal framing comes back in order to get that done. I think that is really important. Those, I would say, the rest is, once you have this as a base and you have leadership on board and you have all the stakeholders on board, the rest is grind work.
Yeah. Well, even what'd you say, 18 days of interviews or something like that for the certification process? Like,
yeah.
Wow.
Yes, 18 days of interviews.
I will say this again, it comes from the fact that our situation was a little bit special. We were so early, we were so quick and eager to get this certification that we ended up being the witness audit for the auditing firm who conducted the audit for us. So in these interviews, it was not just us and the auditor, it was us and the auditor and the auditor's auditor to make sure that they got everything 100% correct. So we ended up doing 18 days of audit interviews and evidence review. Yes, it was a very thorough process. process. So in many ways, I'm maybe more proud of our certificate than most people get to be.
You had a little bit more of a microscope over
Yeah.
Exactly right. It was a great process. It was very gratifying, I will say.
So what's the continuous improvement process now, right? Now that you're certified, what do you have to continue doing?
Yeah. So this goes back to the automation process that I was talking about earlier. So there are essentially two different types of activity for us to maintain those. So there's continuous evidence collection, collecting certain metrics and data from our AWS infrastructure and from other relevant systems. And for this, we have a system. I think I'm not allowed to say the names here, but we have a system that we have hooked into all of these places. They collect evidence for us, and we make sure that it's in place. And then there are periodic reviews of certain documents and certain like the AI impact assessment. Whenever we say, okay, this new feature is of such a scope, or it will have such an impact on our established stakeholders that we need to revisit that AI impact assessment document that is actually part of ISO 42001. We need to do these kinds of activities, right? So like revisiting certain things periodically, once per year, once per X, as stated in our policies, sure. But given that we have integrated this so well into our process, it doesn't feel that bad. That's kind of my short version here, like my short answer. Once you are there, maintaining it is not so bad.
Martin, did you have to build any templates? Like, so, having been through other ISO audits and they're not as new, right? They've been around for years and years. You can almost go find templates, or if you came from another job that had it. Were there any pieces of evidence that you had to build from scratch a template? Or was it something that's just another engineering doc, like a data flow diagram that you already had?
Both.
Okay.
So yes, some of the evidence definitely was something that we could reuse from our SOC 2 efforts. And also, I mean, this is a little bit of a spoiler. So before doing the 42K1 journey, we were actually on the way to 27,001 compliance. So we had already lined up certain things there. So we were able to use that. But there were definitely new things. So the AI impact assessment is a great example. There is no, to my knowledge, existing template in other frameworks that we really could rely on there. So this is something that more or less had to be built from scratch. But I will say we got help from our compliance management partner. Together with them, we ended up building some of these template versions that actually now can be used as templates by other customers of that company. We were their partner in building this, the design partner.
That's great. I do want to circle back to Summer's question. When is the right time to get certified? Like what drives that it's time to go get certified decision?
Yeah, great question. For us, it was first of all, the fact that we saw it as very achievable, so it just made sense. But then also the heavy focus that we have on enterprise customers, right? So and we saw a strong uptick in how much our customers now care about these things, AI governance as a thing, and we saw the number of AI governance questionnaires rise every week. Similar to the established security questionnaires, if you don't have something like a SOC 2 and an ISO 27K1 and you sell to enterprise customers, you will be very familiar with these security questionnaires. And we saw this now happening with AI governance as a topic also. Yeah. Very, very like parallel thing. And we said, okay, if we want to scale in this area, if we want to be an AI vendor to the Fortune 100s of the world, it's just impossible to do so without having this kind of assurance, this kind of certificate.
It's kind of like a cost of doing business almost.
I would say,
right?
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. Martin, great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
Not all vulnerabilities are the same. A critical vulnerability on a marketing laptop isn't the same risk as a critical vulnerability on a production server accessed by a domain admin missing EDR. Sevco Security shows you these interconnected risks. Sevco centralizes intelligence on all your devices, identities, software, vulnerabilities, and security controls, enriching them with threat intelligence and business context in real time, so your security team has exactly what it needs to effectively prioritize and remediate vulnerabilities based on the unique requirements of your business. Think of it as a to-do list for risks, but less annoying. Find a smarter way to manage exposures. Visit securityweekly.com/Sevco today. All right, so let's get into this week's articles. After that, such a great interview segment. That was good. All right, so the first two articles are linked. I wanted to talk about this together because I have a very interesting take on this one. So
I'm sure you do.
Are two CEOs better than one? Paired with the news that Tenable named Steve Ince and Mark Thurman as permanent co-CEOs after successful interim run. Now, everybody ought to know a little bit about my history. I was there when we had co-CEOs the last time when Ron Gula left. After the Insight acquisition, they put Jack and Renaud in charge, and it was a mess. I'm actually a part of the casualty from that time period because the politics got so thick, right? And this is nothing against Steve. Like Steve and I worked very closely together. We took that business from over 90% perpetual revenue to over 90+% subscription revenue in like 2.5 years. Like we flipped the entire financial model. Steve and I worked hand in hand to get that done. He's an excellent CFO. Like I have no questions about that. I worked with Mark Thurman at RSA before he came to Tenable. He's a great sales guy. But the two of them as co-CEOs, there's a gap. And my fear is the board did this because it's hard to replace somebody like Amit.
Sure.
Right? Amit was an amazing technician. Like he just knew it, right? And I just, this announcement to me is just a little like, oh, I don't know if it's going to work out well, but
I question, Matt, was it a little bit of an easy button too? Right?
I think so.
Was it an easy button that it's going to take time to source the right fit? It's going to take time to find the right CEO. We have two folks here who maybe want to jump into the role, and they have maybe complementary leadership skills within the organization. They've been there, done that. They've been there a while. But I will say, in an instance like this, if you don't execute incredibly well, and if you don't have a culture and a strategy around who owns what, define roles and responsibilities, focus on the way it's going to be branded, reporting structure. I mean, it's going to take so much to make that work. It's going to be hard. And you have to be very focused and very targeted and know you have the right two people there. I get it. It can help with succession planning. I get it. It can help with shared responsibilities. But is it worth the confusion that it can literally let loose on your organization? I don't know.
I don't either.
I almost like the model. I almost like the model. I mean, there's a model that exists out there. You have a CEO and you have a president. That model's worked well for decades and decades, right? Have a model like that where you have a CEO and a president. That's succession planning. That helps with shared responsibilities. But there's a definitive leader who sets the culture, who sets the strategy, and is the evangelist for the organization.
I was going to say the same thing, and I completely agree with you, Jason. It's the roles and responsibilities.
Yes.
And, I hate to say it, the swim lanes. What does everyone understand? Otherwise, this could be the, hey, I asked mom and mom said no, so I'm going to go ask dad.
Oh my God, I was thinking the same thing, Summer. Exactly the same thing. You can tell I have little kids, right?
Yes.
It's the first thing I thought of was like, all right, if mom doesn't let me do what I want to do, I'm going to go tell dad.
Yeah. Or you start having it's exactly the question of, well, I know that this person is going to be more understanding about this. So now I'm going to try to go get them on my side before I present this.
Yep.
I do think from a cultural standpoint, that's really, to me, is
Sure.
the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Even more than the roles and responsibilities, it's setting the tone, setting the culture, all of
Yeah.
that for the company. I think it's really tough.
And let me tell you, if those two leaders aren't vigilant about having each other's back, they'll
Yes.
be undermining each other to other people.
And that's
Right? That's a dangerous place to be.
It is. And that's what happened last time, right? And remember, Amit had his specific strategy.
Mhm.
Who's going to pick up those pieces? Because
Yeah.
you've got to have that all aligned. Like, where's the company going to go from here? And you don't
Yeah.
have that. Not that Mark and Steve aren't good, because they are, but do they have the vision of what's next for the
Right.
company, right? And that's the one gap I see. And Art's chairman of the board. Like, Art and I have the story goes back to when I left RSA, why I left and why I went to Tenable, and then recruiting Amit to come to Tenable. Like, Art knows all this, right? It's like there's people out there that I think could fill the role. The question is it too early to bring in somebody else?
Right.
It's too early to do that, and therefore this is the stopgap. I just fear, will it work? That's my biggest thing.
Yeah. Like I said, this has to be very well planned out and extremely strategic, and they have to be well defined in their place in the organization, their roles. What are they responsible for?
Agreed.
And they could have done something different. They could have done
Yeah.
an interim. There are just other ways to do this. So it doesn't feel temporary. So then why would you,
I know.
because you don't want to pretend that it is.
They're permanent co-CEOs.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, time will tell, but we called it. We talked about it here first.
We'll remember this 12 months from now.
Yeah. Episode 392. We're going to remember this one.
Get them both on, interview them at the same time, ask them the same questions, and see how they answer.
Yes. Anyways, next story. CIOs struggle to align cybersecurity with strategy. Sounds like the CISOs. Anyways.
Yeah. Okay. That's why you have a CISO.
Right. That's what I thought, right? But again, this goes back to a conversation we've been having for 6 years, Jason.
Absolutely.
The reporting
100%.
structure of the CISO, who's
100%.
responsible for it. In here in this article, I guess the CISO reports to the CIO, and that's why the CIOs are struggling.
Yeah, and this article comes out of the filter of the CIO between the business and the CISO. That's what this comes out of. You know, you know me, Matt. I pick up on these little nuances within articles too. And there's a line in there that says CIOs are prioritizing cybersecurity, digital transformation, but face some pushback from leadership and growing talent shortage. And I sat back and I said, how many layoffs were there in 2024? Like 200,000 people got laid off in 20. What are we talking about talent shortage right now? Why is that even a thing still? Why is that even in articles? It's going to be in another one, I think, a little bit down further too.
It is. It is.
Why is that a conversation? Listen, we put a job description out last week, and within the first half an hour, there were hundreds of applicants.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing it.
I don't either. Like, we not only security people, but IT people. How many IT people were laid off as well?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I want to say, obviously statistics can be skewed, but I've seen anywhere from 150,000 people last year to 250,000. So let's find a happy medium. Couple 100,000 people last year got laid off.
Right.
Now, what I am hearing from my friends in the industry is that they're seeing the shortage is in the entry level, right?
Yeah.
Folks are looking for mid to senior level or even higher roles, and the shortage is really in more of the entry level side of things. I don't know if I see that, but I understand.
Yeah, but I've even seen some folks who want to punch way above their weight as well, where they'll think that they warrant a senior engineering role. And when you stack them up against the senior engineers that they have, they are entry level. They just don't want to believe it.
Correct.
So there's a little bit of that happening as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. We're actually going to talk about hiring because there's some really interesting, there's two articles kind of back to back on hiring trends, which I think address some of this. But again, it talks about this big shortage. I'm like, Do we really have a shortage? If 200,000 people got laid off last year,
Right. Now we've talked about this before, Matt, and I've always said there's a big difference between a shortage in talent and a skills gap.
right?
Maybe we need to rehone some skills. That's okay. That's why we always hire on attitude and aptitude. We can teach you the skills if you have the right attitude and aptitude to learn, right? And be part of our culture and really put the work in. But that's different. Skills gap is different than a talent shortage. I'm not seeing the talent shortage.
Yeah, agreed. We'll get there, like in 2 articles. First, how to build a cyber risk tolerance statement for your organization as a CISO. Now, when I grabbed this article, I almost flagged this as AI generated.
Matt, you read my mind, my friend. I love it.
I did not run it through Ben's AI article checker, but it looks a little suspicious.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a 30,000-foot view on building this risk tolerance statement for your organization. I mean, it goes over some high-level items like, get a foundation with your leadership team and all your stakeholders to figure out what your risk appetite is, right? And, start... The big piece is focus on risk. That's what I'm going to take out of this, right?
Right.
Focus on risk in your organization. We've been saying this for 6 years. Risk management, risk management, risk management. Get the consensus across the board. Get the consensus of the business. Articulate it to the board and have everybody on the same page. Woo.
Yeah. And the other thing is you're rarely going to get to a point where everybody says, okay, our risk tolerance is between 0.73 and negative 0.64. Stop trying to hone in on any of that.
Exactly.
And look at your trends, look at your direction, and understand what improvement looks like, but you don't necessarily have to know the exact target. And I think, and we tend to look for that.
Right. And Summer, you know it. It's every time there's a conversation, it's its own unique unicorn because it's figuring out whether or not consensus with the rest of the business doesn't reach certain risk appetite. Is it something that you want to take a risk on, right? Can you tolerate it? Mm-hmm. I mean, if it's a major strategic item that you're having a conversation at the C level, it's going to take consensus across the board. And if you're doing it in a silo, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
So you need to have buy-in from the CEO, the CFO, the board of directors on whether or not you're going to make a move. It has to be a conversation. What this does is set up the conversation. This gives you the framework for a conversation.
Yes. The first 3 bullet items are a good segue into next week's Say Easy, Do Hard segment. It's already pre-recorded. Summer, you're on it with us.
Yeah.
It talks about being risk-focused, strategic aligned, and measurable parameters. And what are we talking about next week when we're all at RSA conference? How to strategically align objectives and key results. So it ties right into next week's pre-record. So little hint for everybody for next week.
Yeah.
And
imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today.
all right, now the hiring article. So,
guess what this article was, Matt? This article was AI.
Oh, this one was?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay.
So here's the first thing I do. If there isn't a named author, the first thing I do is I run it through an AI generator.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
It's the AI detector.
AI detector. So this is an AI generated article, folks. Yes. Which is why you probably question some of the things that are in here.
Absolutely. 100%. I mean, again, let's talk about the tech layoffs. 200,000 in 2024. And I actually took a note of how many this year so far, 50K. About 50,000 people 50K. In 2025 that have been laid off in the tech industry. So I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. The talent shortage is not a thing. Skills,
Yeah.
potentially. Talent, it's there.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing in this article, right? Upskilling existing IT workforce. So that's an upskill, right? So there's a skills gap. But then it goes into identity and access management, quantum computing. I'm like,
it goes off the rails.
It got completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it totally went off the rails. You know what it did? It took a whole bunch of buzzwords that are on the internet and compiled it into an article.
Yes.
That's what this article is.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. A skills gap in quantum computing, we do have that because we don't have it yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it was all over the place, right? I mean, the high bullet points: leverage AI for democratization, talent democratization, upskill existing IT workforce, then prioritize identity and access management, address quantum computing, and implement succession planning. How does any of that tie together?
No. I mean, succession planning to an extent, but not in a generic hiring. I mean, that would be part of the conversation we had at the beginning of this with co-CEOs. Like, look, if you're doing succession planning, right, then it would make sense to talk about that over there. But that in here, it's out of place. Anyways.
It's definitely an odd place to discuss that. That's right.
It was all about.
It's all about. Now, this article, the next one is CISOs rethinking hiring to emphasize skills over degrees and experience.
Yes,
Finally.
yes. And can I get a yes?
Finally.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hallelujah.
I mean, this is something we've been advocating for the 6 years I've known you, Matt. I mean, you know my background, right?
Yep.
In summer, I was one of those kids who had no idea what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I thank God that I went to the military and I took the ASVAB test, because that told me what I was strong at. That told me my strengths, my aptitude. That gave me my aptitude. Luckily for me, I went to the Marine Corps School of Electronic Communications and my career took off from there, right? That's it. But, I've been an advocate, and Matt, you know this, forever. How do we test aptitude as early as possible? Middle school. Because if I knew in middle school what my aptitude was, maybe I would have put some focus on it in high school. Tell me what I'm good at, right?
Yeah, and even then, as you think about hiring into roles, this is just a hallelujah article, right? Like,
Absolutely.
Great, get into this. I was looking for a director of cybersecurity, and there was an internal candidate who I just thought was fabulous, and she said to me, "But I'm not a cybersecurity expert." And I said a couple of things. Number one, you're a leader, and you know how to get stuff done. And then number two, I know your brain power, and in 6 months, you'll know more about cybersecurity than me. And she is just doing an incredible job. And those are the types of things that I wish more people looked at. And it goes to that
100%.
aptitude. It's the leadership. It's the, are you able to execute and get others to execute?
Yeah.
And so those things are so, so important.
Absolutely. And, not every kid is built for college right out of high school.
Nope.
They're just not.
Right.
How do we make them workforce ready out of high school? We have to have that level of training where we can get folks workforce ready right out of high school. And then if they've decided to go to college later, awesome. That's great. Let's get them ready for the workforce. I mean, I will argue that I don't know how many interns I've brought into my programs over the course of the years from colleges, from universities, who were not workforce ready at the end of the day. They were not.
Yeah.
You're talking about juniors and seniors in college, right? They weren't workforce ready. So, I would argue we're not doing a good job on either side, K through 12 or at the university level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the interview segments that got canceled earlier in the year was with cyber.org to actually give us an update, because they have been providing education into K-12 and really driving some of those early skills, right?
Yeah,
I know. And they've been starting to see it kind of work on the other end, right?
Yeah.
Placements into universities and these programs. And so cyber.org has been doing a lot to try to move the needle here in the K-12 education side with cybersecurity. I hope we get them back on at some point, but that's so important, right? And you've talked about this for a long time, Jason, in getting it early into the school's hands.
Yeah, that's one of my passions. I mean, the moral of the story of this article, though, is as leaders, we need to be thinking about hiring differently.
Yeah.
It's not about putting the have to have a bachelor's degree, have to have a master's degree. Those days are gone. The problem and the roadblocks that we're going to run into is influencing our HR departments to change the way they hire. That's where you're going to have to put the elbow grease in. That's where you're going to have to put the work in and help educate them and show where we're finding more success in technology and cybersecurity, taking those constraints away, because we're going to get more diversity in the workforce and the candidates that we get in front of us. And we're probably going to get better hires out of it because of that. So we have to just educate HR. We have to work and do that hard work in HR to get them used to kind of breaking the muscle memory that they've had.
And I think some of it also, as you mentioned, the K through 12, and this was something I got in college early on that I don't see being taught in a lot of programs now, is logic and problem solving.
Yeah.
I mean, I took an entire intro to logic class before I took a single programming class in my CS major. And I see that lacking so much. Kids want to learn Python and Ruby, and they want to learn the language, but there's an entire underlying skill underneath of that. And that's something that, you know, you don't have to have teachers who know things like a particular language or hardware set to teach logic.
Absolutely.
If we even just started there, we would be preparing the next generation of workers for a lot of different things. Because a lot of this stuff, I think it does have a shortage of teachers that are available to teach some of this stuff.
Yeah. I would say the only other thing that I would love to see as well is strategic communication skills. And I'll say verbal, written, presentation, all of those, because I mean, the generation I'm seeing coming into the workforce right now speaks in text message. And how can I have you messaging a leader or a director or a VP in my company or to a client speaking in text message? We can't. We have to get our communication skills on par, and they're not. They're just not there.
That's why we cover communication on this show too.
Right.
Which is our next article, by the way. Our last article is why clear executive communication is a silent driver of organizational success. And this ties a little bit back to where we started the article segment, right? What makes executive communication so powerful? Clarity.
Yeah.
Clarity from a single leader. How much clarity are you going to get from a co-CEO structure? I don't know. I'm just saying, but that is such an important part.
You got to do it right if you have that type of a scenario, because you're absolutely right. The communication from the CEO is the heartbeat of the company. It is the heartbeat of the culture. It is the vision of the organization. It's the evangelist of your organization. It's who everyone gets behind and says, let's row this way together. Let's go. That's the leader. And everybody in the organization needs to be beating to the same drum beat, right? But if you have two snare drums, I tied it back to what we were talking about earlier, snare drums in the corner, two snare drums beating at the same time, how are you going to know where to keep beat to? You're not, right? The communication of the leader of your organization is the heartbeat of your company.
And or we could tie it back all the way to the very beginning and say, you can't have two number one draft picks.
That's right.
Right. And so, and you look at the two quarterback situations. That's a controversy. Yeah. Right. The two I'm in Pittsburgh. Come on.
There you go.
We've had our share of issues. We've got a quarterback issue now. But
you gonna get Rodgers? What are you doing over there?
I don't know what we're doing. But honestly, so when you think about that, you're exactly right. The team is learning, and the team learns that cadence, and they know what it is. And this is going to be a tough one. So that communication is going to be a tough one. And as you said, Jason, I've seen it work in companies where you have a CEO and a president, and you know which one is the cultural mouthpiece for the company. Right. And and so that can work. But boy, this one's going to be, we should turn it into a case study.
Yeah, 100%. 9 months from now, I want to talk about this again.
Okay.
See how things are going.
9 months is, it'll be early next year. It's like January. We'll see what the rest of 25 holds for us.
And we can, if just for this segment, these communication skills that this article talks about being so important, is for your divisional leaders as well, your CISO, right?
Yeah.
You know, you align with the CEO and you align with the communication and the vision of the business, but you own your department and you're communicating down to your department, right? And you're evangelizing that mission and that vision. So, you know, it's your job to be able to do that for your employees and really pass that information down, pass that vision down, and be the same type of evangelist.
Yeah, these skills work at various levels, obviously, and they're important at all those levels, right? I was just trying to tie it back to why clarity is so important. And when you have two co-leaders, that clarity can get difficult, but the storytelling, the story within a story, like all those are very key communication guides to help you. And it doesn't matter which role you're in. If you're in an organization and you're a leader, if you got the right communication skills.
Even if you're not a leader, Matt, right? We talk about it all the time. Leadership isn't a title.
Yeah.
It's not a title.
It's an action.
And it's actually almost harder when you are at those divisional levels, Jason, because as at the very top, you're setting that vision and that this is where we want to go to get everybody moving in that direction. When you're, you know, into the org, it's important that you actually convey to everyone all the way down to your entry level IT help desk person, why is what you're doing key to the company succeeding that?
Absolutely.
And that can be really tough to do. You have to be very, very intentional.
100%. And at the same time, in many instances, you're playing interference to any faux pas that may be happening out there in the organization too. Do you know how many times that, you know, over the course of my career, I've had folks coming to me and say, well, the CEO said this, but then the company just did that. What's going on? And they ask the question, right? And you have to be there and play interference, right? And say, well, this was a strategic, you know, decision by the company and blah, 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 blah. And you have to play that interference and work with the team because you want to continue to make sure the team supports the mission and the vision of the organization.
You know, the other thing that's really important to think about is the difference between the hard charging task and success oriented people and the people. And I see this in my communication. I'll lean heavily on my comms folks to help me with my messaging because they'll say, okay, Summer, let's soften this here because I'm laser focused on the success. And they'll say, but this is how people are going to, understand that message and how it's going to be that they will consume it differently. And I'll say, oh, well, I don't want them to do that. And so we'll change it. So, you know, just even understanding that you have blind spots in how you communicate is really important as a leader because you have to have someone else who's bringing that balance. Now, it could be the other way around. You could be like a very people oriented and it's like, hey, look, you're going to lose the folks that are
up a little bit.
Right. But that's a really important thing. That's why there's a whole profession around communication to help us out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Words matter.
Words matter. And how people perceive those words matter.
That's right.
Yes.
Just as much. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you both for joining me today. It was great to have you on, Summer, as your first co-hosting gig. Remember, BSW 392, that's your starting point.
That's it.
Jason knows his, what was it, 106 or something like that?
Oh, no, it was 101.
101. Okay.
Ooh.
101.
Yeah. It's been a while. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Next week's RSA conference, we hope to see you there. But if not, don't miss our pre-recorded Say Easy, Do Hard segment on defining objectives and key results aligned to business goals. Summer's on that one as well. We'll see you again in 2 weeks on Business Security Weekly.